Good morning, Dan and Amy. I'm not the man. We're about to talk to the man. He is Scott Adams, the Dilbert cartoon creator. And as I refer to him, the Trump whisperer, because he sussed out Trump's communication style and sort of gave it form, even if for Trump it's more visceral and intuitive. Very early on in the campaign, he predicted Trump was going to win and kind of tried to identify the genius of Trump's communication style in terms of its broad appeal. And boy, did he turn out to be right, and he's been right again and again. And the interesting thing, I thought about this, we've had Scott Adams on many times before, and it's always, well, he's a licensed hypnotist, and
oh, yeah, that's right.
He studies kind of the psychology of how people receive communication. But one of the other things, that his best credential is he's the creator of one of the most popular cartoon strips the world has ever seen. So that said something about his ability to communicate and know how people respond to particular communications. And so we're pleased to be joined again by the aforesaid Scott Adams. Scott, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So in the wake of the internal strife in the Republican Party, this isn't coming from the D.C. press corps, the usual suspects necessarily, but even though there were never Trumpers during the campaign and so forth. But there was sort of a détente for a while among House and Senate Republicans, and that has been shattered by, most recently yesterday, by Bob Corker and Jeff Flake, who both suggest about the same thing, that Trump is debasing the country. He's diminishing America's standing in the world, and this is a real problem, and we can't let it be the new normal. How do you think that their calls for civility and sort of a better self in terms of how we represent America throughout the world are going to be received compared to Trump's tweets about them basically saying these are just two political hacks who weren't going to be able to get reelected, which is why they're retiring and taking shots at me?
Well, every time I see something like this, I feel like the president is just, leading these people into a narrow ravine before he starts machine gunning them all. They're totally going into his home court advantage. So if they're debating with the president on Twitter or social media or just in news interviews, he just has the advantage there. He can say things that they wouldn't say. He's funnier. He gets more attention. He's got more support in the first place. So I think that their argument depends entirely upon examples of things going wrong, and I don't know what the examples are. Have they offered any examples of how his style has caused a war or made the stock market decline or anything of that nature? Is there any example out there?
No,
Yeah,
I think it's just that maybe
point.
that they can't control him, and they're just not used to not having decorum or like this protocol of how you should behave when you're president of the United States.
Yeah, I've got some friends whose biggest complaint about the president is just that they wouldn't act that way.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah, right.
So there's something about almost the president as an accessory to their outfit. It's like, well, I wouldn't wear that watch with this shirt. So it almost seems like the reasons that they're angry have almost a style or fashion or almost a lifestyle component, but they seem disconnected from anything that matters, like, can I get a job, and, how is ISIS doing, the important stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. I think a lot of it is, and frankly, I'm susceptible to it too. When he talks in or behaves in sort of a brutish manner, that I want my president to speak with proper syntax and mellifluous, uplifting tones in a Churchillian style, and that's not Trump's style. But if you get past your stylistic differences and to some of the substance, that's where there's a lot of support if you're kind of a center-right person in terms of the actual policy choices that are being made in the tax area and the regulatory area and the Supreme Court nominees and other matters. And as you say, the critics in the center-right are suggesting, well, he's pushing us in this direction towards, like, for example, nuclear war with North Korea. And they want to caricature him as this kind of reckless Dr. Strangelove type figure. But one of the problems they have in perhaps raising legitimate concerns, even just about style, is the overreach. And didn't you see that again with the whole Gold Star family issue and Frederica Wilson? If there was a legitimate criticism to be leveled, there was the overreach that undermines the other side's concern.
Yeah, there's definitely some overreaching going on, but I would go back to the fact that we mostly rationalize our choices. We're not really a species that makes decisions based on logic and common sense. If we did, we'd probably agree on more things than we do. But take, for example, the senators versus the people who voted for Trump. Right? The people who voted for Trump see a person who talks the way they talk in fairly direct ways. He curses sometimes, they curse sometimes. He's a little too honest sometimes. They're a little too honest sometimes. But he became the leader of the United States. So they're feeling pretty good about how their model of the world works. Hey, I talk like this, he talks like that, he became president. Now imagine you're a senator, and your entire thing is that you're polite, you're diplomatic, and you did not become president. And you were so close. You were a senator. That's got to hurt a little bit. So I think to some extent the president violates everything they thought they knew about the world.
Yeah, right. Well, and just to your point, does it say something that Tom Perez, the new head of the Democrat National Committee, and others, even including recently Hillary Clinton, but Kamala Harris, now they're taken to using profanity in the public stage and the public square at rallies and the like, and it seems almost like it's forced, like they're trying to do something akin to what Trump does naturally.
Yeah, there's something about authenticity that makes swearing either work or not, and I think people can pick that up. Now, I would argue that the president does it intentionally too, so it's not exactly organic. He knows when he's going to do it. It looks that way to me, but he's just better in this what I call the theater that he's merged with politics. So he's the first president who is somewhat, in my opinion, intentionally merged the theatrical benefits with the political benefits, and somehow he makes it work. He makes us look where he wants us to look. He makes us feel, passionately about things that he thinks are his priorities. Sometimes we hate him, but we're at least thinking about the things he considers priorities. And he does that by simply capturing our imaginations, our attention. He speaks in a visual way. He makes sure that the pace of the script, if you will, is always fast-paced. There are no dull spots in the theater of the presidency lately. So I doubt we'll see anybody do this as well as he does it, and I wouldn't recommend anybody tries. He just happens to be good at this, and so he brought that to the presidency.
Do you think that he watched Senator Flake yesterday, deliver that speech on the Senate floor? And do you think he cares or was fazed at all by him and Corker's actions?
Well, I've said from the start that when people were calling the president thin-skinned, they had it completely opposite from what I see as reality. I don't think you do what he does. I don't think you go in public and say what he says and run for the presidency unless you have super thick skin and you can take a level of shame and embarrassment that is almost unnatural. So I would say the president's ability to shake off criticism might be as strong as anybody's ever in the history of criticism. I've never seen anything like it.
The question was asked of Corker, is Trump a role model for kids? And of course, Corker said, no, he's not at all. Is that something maybe the culture has changed where, number one, it's a question that people aren't asking because they, much like professional athletes, they're not looking to politicians, even the President of the United States, to be a role model anymore?
Well, it seems like every time we looked at a president to be our role model, that didn't work out for us in the past. There's a lot of situations where we're thinking, well, maybe that Kennedy wasn't such a great father and husband, and well, maybe they did a few things they shouldn't have done. So yeah, I think the country is growing up in the role model department, and I think especially Republicans are looking at their Bible and their parents and other sources for their role models. And the president, to his credit, and I think this has helped protect him quite a bit, is that he explicitly said, "I'm no angel," and never presented himself as a role model.
Yeah, right. He never claimed to be a paragon of moral virtue.
But Bob Corker really did set Twitter on fire yesterday when he said, "Same untruths from an utterly untruthful president, hashtag alert the daycare staff."
Yeah, I got to give him props for the
That was good.
daycare reference, just in terms of persuasion, because it's visual. It takes your brain to a certain place, and yeah, in terms of a public persuasion, that was A+.
Now, is Trump also just the beneficiary of the quality of his enemies? And I think about this in the context of the Russian collusion investigation. Now that the worm seems to be turning a bit, at least, and the water getting muddied with respect to the revelation that, according to the Washington Post, that Hillary Clinton and the DNC, Hillary Clinton's campaign, the DNC paid for the now infamous Trump dossier, combined with revisiting the Uranium One deal making that she was doing while Secretary of State, combined with real questions about political surveillance and using state resources for political purposes at the Obama Justice Department, the Obama National Security Team. It seems to me that part of this benefit that Trump receives, where these stories end up kind of working out to his benefit, is just because I guess I overreach again, or the frankly lack of integrity of many of his political opponents, starting with the presidential candidate he ran against.
Yeah, there's a lot to the quality of his opponents, but the thing that strikes me is, why is Russia involved with everything we do? Can they stay out of anything? It's like doesn't even matter what the topic is anymore. It's like, well, what did Russia do? How is Putin's involvement in this? So that part's crazy, and I think that the public has sort of a snow blindness about all the Russian stuff. Mm-hmm. You and I, the three of us, we probably follow politics. Yeah, but I would bet that 95% of the world is just saying to themselves, something about Russia,
yeah.
and they don't really know what's going on. They don't know what's been proven. They don't know what's yet to be proven. So it's this big ball of Russian confusion that's now working against both sides.
Right, it's just competing allegations, essentially.
Yeah, I think it's a wash at this point. I think people are probably recognize that if something was seriously bad with the current administration in Russia, that it would have at least leaked by now. Even if they hadn't, taken it to whatever next level they do legally, certainly it would have leaked if there was something damaging out there.
Doesn't it seem to me like Trump brings all of society's ills to the fore, and to some extent, because, I mean, not that he's doing it, but in this context, he just kind of exposes that there is nobody at the table with clean hands. So for Trump's bad behavior towards women and the allegations that plagued him during the campaign, now you have Hollywood melting down with substantiated claims against Harvey Weinstein and other Hollywood moguls, and A-list actors getting criticized by other actors and actresses, and it's just a whole core meltdown in Hollywood, otherwise a bastion of the left, otherwise an opponent of Trump's and Republicans on the Hill.
Well, it may be part of a larger phenomenon that in olden times, let's say a few decades ago, people could do terrible things and there's a good chance you would just never hear about it. And now those days are over. You're going to hear about everything. Social media and just people in general are more willing to come clean with all their dirty secrets about other people especially. So I think we're at a place where we'll never again have a good president.
Right.
And by good, I mean someone who passes every moral filter. I don't think that's going to be a thing, and not because we're going to only elect people who are immoral. It's just that if you dig deeply enough, everybody's going to find something they don't like over the course of someone's lifetime.
He is Scott Adams, Dilbert cartoonist and Trump whisperer. Scott, thanks so much for joining us again. Always appreciate your insights.
All right, my pleasure. Thanks.
Take
care.
He
joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what